Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Area Control Bros, where we talk about area control games mostly. Uh,
Mostly.
Today we're talking about three shorter old games, one with a recent reprint. We're talking about El Grande, Tammany Hall, and Huang.
Two with a
Slash,
recent reprint, even. Yeah.
true, actually, El Grande was also recently reprinted. Huang originally being Yellow and Yangtze. But Yellow and Yangtze actually, it's interesting it was reprinted and renamed so soon because Yellow and Yangtze was actually only in 2018,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
recent in most people's
Yeah,
estimation, but I guess it's probably 50 years in board game years. So
yeah.
anyway, we're going to start things off right away with Tammany Hall, it seems like.
Yeah. Tammany Hall. Now, this is probably, in my estimation, the least popular of the three games.
Hmm.
Well, maybe not. I've just checked on the Geek, and it looks like Huang is rated much, would you say, lower? It has a higher overall number, so it's like
Well,
Huang
I
is
think if
apparently the
I
least
think if you're
popular.
looking at stats for Huang, you should be looking at stats for Yellow and Yangtze.
Oh, is it not of the same page?
They don't
Oh,
have
okay.
the same entry.
It used
Um,
to have the same BGG page when it was in the crowdfunding phase,
oh
so
yeah,
that's what
it
surprised me
has
there.
I don't like that they separated it. It's kind of weird because especially because
Yeah,
they're basically the same game, right? So,
yeah.
but
But
whatever.
okay, having looked at that now, yes, Tammany Hall is the least popular of all these games, still in the top 1,000, and I think a lot to talk about there. We've played a lot of Tammany Hall.
We have, yeah. So interestingly, this is from a designer who basically this is the last thing he did, but he just did two kind of very small projects before this. And then he did this, and then this was just kind of his mic drop, and that we've never been seen or heard from since. I I guess one of two things happened. Either this was like the game that he wanted to make, and then that's like he's done, he's back to working his 9 to 5, or this game was simply not commercially successful enough that the publisher asked him to make another one. Which is totally possible in the board gaming world. I mean, there are all sorts of great games that don't have a huge commercial following.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe one of the people who helped produce it was Italian and got offended.
True, true. The hierarchy of the Irish in this game is unknowable. I assume the designer must have been Irish, right?
Right. Now, so for those not in the know, the reason we're talking about the Irish and the Italians, this Tammany Hall game is basically themed around people immigrating into New York, and what would the era uh, what would the era be on that? I guess like the early 1900s. No,
It's between 1850 and 1870.
okay,
Ah,
a bit
okay.
earlier than I was thinking. But yeah, you kind of end up looking at New York City and what type of groups were immigrating at that time period, and so you end up dealing with talking about like Italian neighborhoods and Irish neighborhoods, which maybe could rub someone the wrong way, but I think it ends up being a lot of fun. It's cool, like the history with the game.
Yeah,
The theme does make this game a lot more fun than if it were just nondescript meeples, but instead there's like political corruption and gang warfare between ethnic groups basically, and it's all been kind of turned into this meeple, just
yeah.
meeple on
Well,
a board.
the meeples are the mob bosses that are coming to the polls, going, "You're going to vote this way, okay?"
Yeah, and
Like,
people just vote for whatever the mob boss tells them to in this time period. Apparently,
yeah.
it's just
We
like,
got,
hey, we're all voting for this guy. It's like, okay, sure.
yeah, the cubes are the ones that are the Irish. You got the
That's true. You're
Irish
right. Yeah,
cubes, the
you're right.
English cubes. Yeah,
Yeah, they're not even dignified with a meeple. They're just merely a cube.
they're
Right.
voting blocks. They're literally
and
voting blocks.
and that's what the area control is about, right? Like, I mean, everything's district up, but what are you really fighting for? You're fighting to be in the spots with these different cubes, sort of these communities, if you will, of people of all sorts. sorts of backgrounds. And sometimes be like, oh, this neighborhood has a bunch of Italian people, and I'm trying to score on all the Italian people, so I want that neighborhood a ton. But then
Yeah.
yeah, it gets fun in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I
um
think one of my favorite mechanics about this game is the like when you win the election and you're like elected mayor for the like term, you have to dole out the like superpowers to all the other players, and you just have to pick
mm,
the like one that you think is that they can make the least use out of, but they're all good. You know, you're
It's
like,
yeah,
thematic
okay,
too because the mayor is
yeah,
electing his cabinet basically,
right.
mm,
I love that
and
part
which
of the
which is
game.
cool. Ironically, this game does have a runaway leader problem, and I think that that mechanic helps it be
Yes,
less of a runaway
definitely.
leader problem. Like I think it'd be even worse if they didn't have this. But I like
Right.
this mechanic where like the person who wins gets a pat on the back and it's like, you did it. You're the mayor. Now give everybody else bonuses.
Right. And I think
yeah,
important to mention, Mayor gets 3 VP, which
Yes.
isn't nothing, but these powers that you get are so powerful and impactful, right? The Mayors just get in VP. These other powers are so powerful and impactful that it's kind of better than the 3 VP, which I think, to Will's point, does help mitigate that runaway leader problem.
It
Where it comes
can.
back, though, is that someone can be 1 point behind the person who ends up becoming mayor, and it's like, well, like I said, those powers are worth more than 3 points. So if you're 1 point behind, can you make that power worth 4 points? Well, now you're caught up. Maybe you can make it worth 5 or 6 points if you play your cards right.
yeah. There's a lot about the timing of when you get elected mayor. Like, if you can just get elected mayor like last when like it's the most important, if you could be getting like benefits from like the powers and be like still controlling a good number of districts, or like you can get elected mayor early and then like get powers later on. It's kind of hard for it is a little hard for people to stop you.
Yeah.
I think this game. Another thing to mention about this game, I think, before we go further, is that player count matters a lot for this game.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
in our experience, this game is basically a three-player game.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've enjoyed it a lot at 3 player, 4 player not
I
so
think
much.
it for this game suffers a lot. Um, there is a very typical board game thing, which is when you add an additional player, you just make the for area control games and for other games even, you just make the amount of available spaces or areas to control bigger or more. And this game has that as well, kind of, but it's a little bit different because it's just increasing it's accelerating the availability of spaces that will always be accessible to people.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a result, by the end of the third round, it's extremely cramped. And with three people, I think it's just cramped enough. And with four people, somebody is not going to get to play the game.
Yeah, somebody
Right.
just gets pushed out really early, and then you just have no districts and you have no power, and it kind of sucks.
I think it's almost impossible to push one person out of the game entirely in three player. They may not be in contention to win at the very end, but they'll at least be at minimum in a king making position and at most still be able to threaten winning. But I
Yep.
think because of the way political power works in Tammany Hall, which is to say winning gives you more resources to win next time with like the political favors and whatnot, and also with if you won the district, your meeple stay there,
Yeah,
your mob bosses, I should say. It's kind of like losing compounds on itself. So if someone is wiped off the board for whatever reason, just bad luck or accidentally ganged up on, um, not only do they have to recover from zero on board, but they also have to recover from almost zero in political favors, which is almost
Right.
impossible. Like it's just over for you at that point.
yeah, yeah,
And at 3, I don't think you really have that accidentally ganged up on problem. Whereas at
No,
4,
no,
you really, really do, just because space is so tight. At
it'll just
3, I
happen.
feel
Like
like part of
yeah,
why the game ends up being so close is that you kind of know who's in the lead. You know what I mean? You kind of know who's doing good and who's, really controlling the board. And you can really punish people in this game. I mean, it can be a really mean game if you want it to be.
no, even at three players, if two people decide to gang up on the leader might be not able to win after that. It's
Right.
the
Yeah.
slander mechanic and just the ability to the various ways you can contest people um, mean that this is a very interactive and, in the words of some, a very mean game because
Right.
it's all zero sum. Like you can't share the victory or share wins in places really at all. So, and more often than not, your interaction with players isn't really overtaking them; it's stripping things from them
Mm.
Yeah.
um, via the slander stuff.
And it's
And
like,
Via the
so,
slander, as well as
yeah,
yeah.
even just winning that election in any given district, right?
yes,
People
yes,
are losing
you
stuff
take the mob
then when you
boss.
win. You can win by
Yeah,
one in a place where you've put, you know, 10 of your guys and the other person has 9, and they're going to lose all
Yeah.
9. And it's like, oh my gosh,
yeah,
Yeah.
it can be
And
it's
that's
very, very punishing.
And that's what I love about this game too. It's like it all ties back into the theme. It's nothing personal, kid. It's politics, right?
Right.
Like
true. This
Yeah.
is, I
it's
think
like it's
this
first
game
past the post.
this game is actually a clever meta commentary on how politicians view their constituents. Like they're people, but we're just cubes.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree
And
more. I love that aspect of it.
and so there is a kind of funny commentary that kind of comes to mind when you play this game. But
Yeah, you find yourself saying pretty
yeah,
funny things with this game. You're like, oh no, Will's doing really good with the Italians. He's got way too many Italian favors. Like we have to stop him. Someone has to
Yeah,
stop
and imagine the mayor's giving you police chief, and you're like, "Oh, we have to lock up a few Italians here, redistrict a little bit." Like,
him. Yeah.
you almost feel a little grimy, saying it, but it's like, you're kind of
yeah. This
forced
is
into
this
doing
is
this role
makes
play.
the top 5 list of board games that you don't want to be overheard playing in a public place,
Yeah, yeah,
probably
definitely.
because people will just have no idea.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We've played this at the local meetup, and
Yeah, we
I
did.
felt a little bit awkward, which is rare for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. It's true. Well, Tammany Hall. I mean, I don't know if we have a whole lot to. I guess we should go into cons, but we kind of already covered with that. There's a runaway leader problem with this game, as I
Hmm.
said, which is compounded at higher player counts. It's really best at 3, but it's not like a game where you can add it in a 4th and it's not a huge downgrade. It's like I really wouldn't even play this at 4.
Yeah, I think we've
Somebody's
done
Yeah,
it
I
at
don't really have much of a
for what,
desire. Yeah.
2, maybe 3 times now, and every time
every single time the same thing happened. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
And
very
Yeah.
fun at 4.
I think also for cons, I would say that the combat in this game, which isn't technically combat but is a political voting contest, um, it does kind of have that randomness to it, where because basically you both perform a secret bid of your
Right.
forces into combat, which is quite similar to a very old area control game. The original Dune 1978 had also had a double secret bid for combat, but that game had a lot more bells and whistles to combat. Whereas this is basically there's just the bid aspect, and in this bid, there are a lot of considerations, which I think are parts of that's part of why I like this game and part of why I don't like this game, which
Mm,
is to say that suppose it's open information how much of each favor you have. So suppose you have 5 Irish favors in the relevant election, you can throw those 5 in and you've got 2 mob bosses. So you have a total possible power in this combat basically of 7. But there's another election going on that you can't afford to lose, and so someone can take advantage of the fact knowing that you absolutely cannot bid into this battle and they can only bid 3 and take it, confidently knowing that you are not willing to lose this other battle. But I think what this leads to is a lot of situations where you kind of benefit from you kind of benefit randomly from like people having limited resources.
mm.
Am I making any sense?
I think so. Yeah, there's definitely some elections where it's like I feel clever because I've looked at your resources, looked at the other elections you're going to be in later in the turn, and I make an assessment and I say, well, you need to save your favors for this other one. I could probably get away with putting one favor in here and kind of snipe the victory. But it's just as often that um, it feels like a total toss up which one of the elections the opponent is going to go into. Um, So yeah, I get what you mean. Where there are certainly sometimes we played this where I just go, okay. I mean, I'm happy to have won these few elections. I don't know what I did. Right? Was that a strategic decision that I made? No, it's that Ben and Will are warring on the other side of the board on these
Yeah, you
other
just
three
like
elections.
sometimes you just incidentally win, and I think one big thing for combat systems that I tend to like, that I give high marks to, is they make you feel like you're smart, or that you made a good decision. And I think oftentimes in this game, the combat or the elections is kind of like, well, I just win here because like you can't spend resources here, or I just lose here because like I can't compete with you here at all. Like I just literally, you have more favors than me or whatever. So, and because you have more resources than me here that you're willing to spend, I might as well spend nothing and just lose here and keep the resources. It kind of forces, when you're on the losing side of this game, it feels like every decision that you make feels bad. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
And then sometimes, yeah, you get random wins that way because people have to spend their attention elsewhere, but then that also doesn't feel great. It's kind of like, cool, like I got this, but like I didn't do anything. It was just like
Right.
the two people who were in the lead this
Yeah.
game are fighting it out, and I'm just kind of the spectator and managed to get some benefit out of it, but I don't know.
I'm curious on this though, because I agree. There's bound to be a number of elections that give you that feeling during the course of the game, but from my perspective, I feel like I have much more of the, oh wow, like, I really pulled it off here. I feel like you're bound to get a little bit of each, but I feel like there might be more of that, good feeling of, I actually did make a cool strategic decision, and, relatively simple system with the double hidden bidding, but there it gives you a good amount of strategic like thinking space. Some of it can be a little bit of an illusion where, does your choice really matter? But I feel plenty good, playing this one, and I
Yeah.
feel like I do cool stuff. I
Yeah.
don't know about you. I think there's bound to be a little bit of both in any given game.
Yeah, no, I'm just
Yeah.
finding cons, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
like,
Yeah.
I'm not picking on it for no reason. I'm just saying, like, I think realistically it's not like an insanely amazing combat system. I think it's sufficient, and there are highs and lows to it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
It's
basically.
honestly, it's my favorite moment in any Tammany Hall game is when you like shuffle all of your favors like down below the table, and then you both like hold out your hand, and you're like just waiting to see like what is it, and then like there's sometimes where you just win and you didn't bid anything, and you're like, yeah, that's right, or like like you
we
lose
own this
and
block.
yeah, like, and then there are like times where you lose and you're like, but the other guy put in like, five favors, and you're like, that's right, I didn't even care. Like,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. It can lead to some pretty visceral, reactions. The combat resolution system. I like that
And
part
it's
of it.
quick, it's simple, it's nice and quick. And I mean,
this
like,
is
Yeah.
this is quick, yeah.
it's going to be a pro for all of these games because it is like they're all a little bit lighter, but it is easy to pick up. Like you can pick
Definitely.
up Tammany Hall pretty quickly. Um,
Absolutely, yeah.
I could teach
Yeah.
this to my grandma if I was really determined. It might take a little
That's a
bit.
funny way to put it. Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
don't think I have too much else on Tammany Hall. You guys got any other thoughts?
No, I don't think there's not a whole lot going on in this game, I feel like, so there's almost not much to say beyond what we've already said. I think we've covered pretty much everything. It is quite light. BGG has it at 2.7. I might even say it feels like even less than that.
Yeah,
What's
2.78 does feel a little bit high for this one.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
how heavy does BGG think Tyrants of the Underdark is? 2.55. I think Tyrants is heavier than this. It's got to be. Well, it's not an important conversation, but
Yeah, I'm talking about unimportant conversations. How heavy is Jenga?
Jenga.
Is that on BGG?
Yeah, they've got everything. They've got all the nonsense games.
Like, what is Jenga?
Jenga's a 1.1. I
I
guess
was gonna
one is
say.
like the floor.
Yeah, I was like,
So
one's got to be the floor, right?
one, you
Like,
can't go below one. At least I hope not.
right,
Maybe tic
right.
tac toe is below one. I don't know, but or
yeah,
at one. But Yeah, I feel like this game is very light. It's strategically heavy, actually. Like there are a lot of things to think about, but I think
Yeah.
the rule set is very light. It's easy to teach, easy to learn, and then once you learn, you're just going to be sitting there thinking about all the ways that your turn can go wrong all the time and all the different angles of political
I never should have named
intrigue.
the police chief. I can't believe I did that.
Yeah, yeah.
Contributing to the game feeling light, the board does kind of walk you through the turn even, like
Yes, that is
Yeah.
true. I
it
think it
shows, it has a little arrow going, where do you place in what order, and
this
all of
game has
that.
a great board.
Yeah.
That helps. It's a board game after all. This game has a
Mm.
really good board, and it even has like arrows to show you the direction to resolve elections in and that kind of thing.
Yep.
All that
Yeah.
stuff is appreciated.
Yeah, I do think that the actual like moment to moment combat can feel a little random, but like the entire turn is setting up those combats, like
Mm.
I'm going to slander him here so he can't vote here at all because otherwise I won't have this election like anyways, because I don't have any Irish favors or whatever. There's some of
It
those decisions that make me feel smart, where
Yeah.
it's like I'm going to save that till the very end or whatever.
There are some times where like you can't help but leave yourself open to a like slander.
Yeah.
You can with smart play, you absolutely can play around the super slander and not get adjacent region slandered.
Hmm.
Uh,
Those can be
that's
brutal if you don't play around
you
them.
can play around that. Late game it's a little harder because you end up being spread out. But I think there are so many. I think there are a lot of situations in this game where Ben and I both have a guy and Blake is happy to take either of those places by slandering, and it's just a kind of a coin toss whether he goes for me or Ben, especially early game because like nobody's really in front yet,
Right.
Yeah.
and so it's like, oh, he chose me. I guess I just don't get much this round, you
Right.
know. And
Yeah.
it's kind
Yeah.
of an arbitrary decision, which I guess is what I was trying to get at earlier. Like, I do think there are a lot of interesting decisions leading up to the elections where you're setting up and getting favors and thinking, I got to have, German favors for this important place I'm trying to keep with German mob bosses. And maybe you've got more people in there, so it's harder to slander you out. But I think the game is at its best in the regions you care about. And
Yeah.
it's at its worst in kind of the random regions where just stuff just happens but I think those regions end up being important for final game scoring. This is a game where like the final victory point score is usually within like 3 or 4,
Right.
right? It's pretty
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. I feel like most of our games have been fairly tight. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, though.
Anyway, should we give scores?
Yeah, I think we should give
Sure.
scores. So BGG
BGG
has
gives
this
this a
one
7.3.
right.
Hmm.
I'm not
Are we
like
gonna go above
offended by
BGG?
that. I think I always have fun with this one. I think I would give it like around that same score, around a 7.5, let's say.
Yeah. I was in that same mindset. It's at 7.5. Yeah. I'm like happy to play Tammany Hall. I'm not like itching to, but if somebody brings it out, I'll play. You know.
Yeah.
Dang, and now it's gonna make it look like I'm a copycat because I was gonna give it a 7.5 as well.
We're just
Hey,
so
we're
in
all in the
sync,
same
It's
place on
like
it. That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is like a picture perfect 7.5 for me, where this is like a totally respectable board game. It's a good design. It's easy to teach. I think what prevents it from going higher for me at least is that there's not a whole lot of like meat to it. And there are other kind of random things that I said I'm not a huge fan of, but like, this is not there are games that are of equal length, and we'll actually be talking about two of them, which are more strategically interesting than this.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I
Yeah.
think this game doesn't. There's still a lot to think about, and I think it's a strong 7.5. It's not like, oh, I
Yeah.
guess I'll give it a 7.5. Like, this is a good game.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be unhappy to play this, as Ben
Yeah.
said. But I do think it doesn't reach into like the upper echelons of this particular subgenre of area control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about not
I
as
agree.
much meat, it's like jerky. It's like a beef jerky kind of game. It's a snack. I like it.
Yeah. We got to start using that. That's a
You know what I
beef
mean? That
jerky
feels
game.
about right. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
It's lean,
Tammany
it's
love it.
lean.
jerky.
It is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. All
I
right.
think
Well, moving on to El Grande. Oh, sorry. Were you going to say something, Blake? I didn't mean to
no.
interrupt.
I was gonna yeah, El Grande.
Oh,
Yeah, El
Grande.
Grande, the
El
big.
Grande.
The
Yes.
big.
Well, I feel like if you're watching this YouTube video or listening to this on Spotify, you probably heard of or played El Grande, or you should have heard of or played El Grande.
Right.
um, it's kind of a area control classic. I wouldn't say it invented area control because it didn't, but it certainly kind of paved the way for modern area control design, coming from earlier stuff like Risk,
Yeah.
Axis and Allies, that kind of
Like
thing.
Citizen
Yeah,
Kane,
go ahead.
defined like the
Yeah,
new wave.
it wasn't the first movie, but it was a very important movie for paving the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, 1995, which in board game dog years, this might have come. This might as well have come out when the Roman Empire still existed. This is like some ancient board game stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, the archaeologists are scraping it off, We're
yeah,
just
the
rediscovering this
archaeologists,
one.
they had to dig like 100 feet under some ruins, and they found like a couple bloodstone dominoes, and they found an intact box of El Grande,
Right.
Yeah.
and they assumed they went together. They just threw the bloodstone dominoes in the box, and they just now it's an El Grande expansion. Anyway,
Hmm.
so Wolfgang Kramer was speaking of old. Wolfgang Kramer is now, I think, in his 80s. So if you're wondering why he hasn't been active recently, it's because he's retired by now, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
it hasn't been active
Um,
generally, probably. Yeah.
yeah, and this gets a 7.8 on BGG, but you have to remember it's in the top 100, and so that's weighted in such a way that it means it's really, really good because it's been rated significantly more than games that are typically rated less and have higher numerical ratings. Like
Right.
anything that's got like over like an 8.5 or an 8.7 probably just has like fewer people that have rated it.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so this is a game that it's absolutely stood the test of time. This is a game that playing it today feels just as fresh as you would expect playing like a new board game from current year. And it doesn't feel like any aspect of this game falls flat, is extra, is unnecessary. It's just every part of it kind of works together perfectly, in my opinion. So high
Yeah.
praise from me.
Yeah, I think the only thing that might age it is the theme. Like it comes from an era
Mm.
of board games that is more interested in the historical kind of settings. Like if this was made today, it might be like in space,
If this was made today, it'd be anthropomorphic animals in their little fairy kingdom,
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
it's quite possible.
that's what it would be. No, I like the theme for this game, and I
dude.
think
Yeah,
it might be fresher today as a result because it's different, right? It's not another anthropomorphic animal game. It's kind of like you got your caballeros, you got the El Grande,
Right.
and you know,
you got the king. You got
you got the king.
feudalism, and you like it.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. I
Um,
think that's cool about the theme too. Like it's not one that, ties you in a bunch. I feel like it kind of lets you focus more on the mechanics. And the mechanics are great. I agree with Will that everything fits together super well and complements all the other elements. I'm 100% with you.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if this game does get rethemed in the future, though, just because this is such an evergreen design. I think you could do this with any theme, and it would just be a good game.
yeah,
But I'm fine with the theme as is. As Blake says, it's not really that important. It's just kind of window dressing for what's just a great board game design.
Yeah.
um, it's hard to even know where to begin with this, but I guess we should start at the beginning of the turn. I think we're the area control bros, but we do like auction games, and part of the reason why I like this game is because there's also an auction element. And it's an auction element that is not involved with combat, which would make me dislike it, but rather an auction element on turn order, basically.
Mm.
Yeah.
And the way that you have a limited number of basically bidding resources to spend over the course of the game. And like once you've spent your high numbers to secure something, you can't spend that number anymore for the rest of the game, means that you have to really consider how important something is to you, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But at the
absolutely.
same time, because it's a good design, even when you're losing out on taking the first bid, you can, especially if you're like last in the order from the previous turn, you can then safely play a low number and then get a bunch of meeple in your court, and you're still feeling like you're getting something out of it. Like I think
Right.
what's nice
Yeah.
about that phase is that nobody really gets squashed in this phase. Everyone's getting something out of it. They may not get exactly what they wanted, and that's why there's tension. But I think everybody's getting something, and it's not the same thing that they're getting. So it encourages people to start diversifying their strategies right in the first turn of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a couple times where it's like the first round, I'm kind of thinking like, okay, I don't care too much about this bid, but like, what number am I like even looking at the numbers because like some of them are better than others. Like I forget which ones, but like some of them give you the same amount of meeples. So like the 6 and the 7, and you're like, well, I'm gonna get rid of the 6 because maybe I can use the 7 to win a bid later. Like I've had those thoughts while I'm like looking at the cards. It's like I want 4 meeples. I want to pick second. I don't want to pick last. Like you know
Right.
like there's some
Yeah.
thinking already involved with like you need to get some boys in
Yeah,
my
I
court.
think it's
You
super
know.
interesting. To me it's so cool that like you have both the draw to put in a high card as well as a low card, right? Because you're either gunning for turn order or you're gunning for more meeples to put on the board and help you win. And it's like sometimes I'm thinking on the early turns, like I gotta like stockpile my guys so that if the right card comes out later, I have like enough people to place down. You know, to me that part is really really interesting and cool. It feels like it could be its own bidding game in itself, but it kind of can't because it's so contingent on one of the options being that turn order being so important. Once that comes into play, it actually
Yeah.
is quite important what the turn order is. Some games it wouldn't
I
matter.
also I also think one of the most important parts is that it never feels bad to win an auction. And I say that and it sounds a little bit weird, but like the one constant like card, like the one thing that's always in the auction is the like moving the king. And even if you don't have like all of the meeples to be able to put out to take advantage of that, it's like it's one of the most powerful moves you could do. So like you always want to be like winning, like you're never like sad to get the like move the king unless you maybe have like literally 0 meeples to put out, you know?
Yeah.
No, and oftentimes the person who won the bid will go for that one, and then it means that if you came in second, well, you get the best card out of the ones that aren't the permanent, that isn't like the permanent king moving card. And there's probably some great choices there. There's stuff that's worth a lot of VP, lets you alter the board drastically. In some cases, would let you move the king a second time, which enables some funny things to happen. And I guess moving on from the action to like the card market, it's interesting to see the card market in this game because like you have to imagine this card market in 95 must have been mind blowing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, that's a
Like
good
this
point.
is
I hadn't thought of that.
like, I mean, think about what's around in 95. Think about this game compared to any board game in 95, right? It's insane how advanced this game is and how many good ideas there are. And like the card market being tied to the turn order and auction is really cool. And so you're not just bidding for who's acting first, but you're bidding for who's taking the card first, which also brings in all the things that we like being able to hate draft bid
Mm,
to make sure you take that thing first just so somebody else doesn't get it, which makes things a little more spicy, right? It's like, oh well,
right.
I can't let
Yeah.
Ben have that wedding, too many guests are invited.
you
Yeah.
it's really funny sometimes in these games too where you're like you don't want the card that you're trying to hate draft, and so you start trying to convince the like the third person, like, well, actually, I think this could be really good for you, like, but we can't let Will
Oh
have
yeah,
it, but I'm not going to take it. You have to take it.
this is
Right,
another
right.
great thing. This is another sign to me of a great design, which is that the game creates table talk innately. You know,
Yeah.
table talk is not in the rule book. Politics is not in the rule book, but this game will generate a political conversation no matter what. And it's going to happen right from the very beginning because it's like, oh, yeah, I don't care about that card. You can totally take it. And then, like, trying to play it off, but actually you do want the card, or maybe you really don't want the card and you want them to think that you want it and just overbid for it because you want to take something else anyway. And so there's all sorts of like funny misdirection you can do during this phase just in the table talk. And this is something it works fine at 3, and I've never played this game like at 5, but I imagine
Mm.
even at 5, this goes up, right? There's
Yeah,
more cards in the market, but everybody cares about something.
I've played it at 5. It's good at 5. Yeah, like it's just more of the like good stuff that I like about it. It is just more like table talk of like, and like and there's like more. You're still just bidding, and like all the same
Right.
stuff feels good, and it still flows really well.
Yeah, on that, I remember when we first played this, and Ben had already played the older version of the game. I think now you might have played the older version of the game too, Will. I don't know, but me, the first time I'm playing this is when the new Kickstarter came in, and Will, had us over, and we're playing this game.
It
And
wasn't
Ben,
crowdfunded. It was just a normal reprint. Like it was just
oh
they
sure,
just put it. Yeah, but anyway, sorry.
no, 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 good to know. That I kind of like that they released it
Yeah, it
that
just
way.
went
I'm
straight to
so used to
retail. Good for them.
Kickstarters nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, Ben was coming in and kind of mentioning right after the first play. And when I played this at 5, one of the most interesting things about this was how competitive the card market is. And I think you were the first to mention, Ben, like there's something in the rule book about reducing the card market by 1 when you're doing a 3-player game, like we've done a lot of our
Yeah,
games at.
you combine like the
And
Yeah, we,
twos
we
and the
did that.
threes. I think.
yeah, and I liked it better once we made that change. And so I got to imagine that more players, more competition for the cards, like it's probably going to feel good.
It is. I think, yeah, the card market is great in this game, and I think what's interesting is that none of the cards are like generic, really.
Mm,
I feel like every card in the market is kind of wacky or is like
Yeah,
leading into a certain strategy for that particular turn. And some of them enable synergy, like they're the cards that score extra VP in certain regions. But I think an experienced player of this game will be thinking about that in advance and like setting up in anticipation of that. Like maybe I want to set up in the low point regions this game because I know that that card won't be as contested, or the high point regions if I'm feeling greedy or whatever. And so it's kind of there's a lot of angles you can be taking strategically with the card market because
yeah.
you're going to go through most of the deck, so you'll see most of the cards. Obviously, you won't be able to play most of them because other players took them, but most of those cards will be played
Yeah, you
by
get kind of
somebody.
yeah,
used to what's in the deck after a play or two, and you start thinking about that, and that's kind of fun too, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. So
And there's
so
the
other than
Castillo.
yeah,
And
the
there's the Castillo.
Castillo, that's what I was about to
I want
bring up as well.
I want to say one more thing about the action card thing, which is
Yeah.
before we move on to the Castillo, which of course I'm excited for, but is that it's interesting because like a lot of modern board game designs would be like if this were a modern board game design. So first of all, as I said, it would be anthropomorphic animals, but also the auction would be like a separate distinct phase from the rest of the game. There'd be the auction phase, there'd be the market phase, and then there'd be the actual players taking turns phase. You know what I
Right.
mean? But this game actually has it like all bundled. So like it felt really weird the first time I played this because like when you take that card out of the market, um, you just take your turn straight up.
Yes.
Like that's you just take your turn,
Yeah, you're kind of
and
already on to this like next phase while everybody else is still in like, well, what card am I gonna pick?
yeah,
Yeah, it does
like
kind of flow.
you're done, and there's still stuff to pay attention to because the board is going to change a lot every turn. But this game plays really fast. Like the amount of time it takes to go to cycle through a whole series of player turns is very short, and a lot happens, and so it's like a very eventful game. You
Yeah.
go straight through a whole, top to bottom on a turn quite quickly, even though there's a lot going on. There's table talk and stuff, but it's just there's no extra baggage in the turn structure, I guess is what I'm saying. There's no,
Yeah.
it's just like it's the absolute minimum for it to be good, and it's like, but there's still room for table talk, and it feels great.
Yeah, I agree. That's an interesting point too, because there's 9 phases and 3 special scoring phases, so kind of 12 phases of the game in total, right? 12 rounds. And man, I mean, the game goes really quick for a 12-round game, you know?
Well, the
How
three
long
scoring
are our
phases, I don't
plays
think we should
usually?
count because like that's literally just the scoring, isn't it? Isn't it just like 9 turns
No,
basically?
because of the Castillo, you do something in the scoring
That's
phase,
true.
but it
Okay, yeah,
is kind of a mini phase, I would
it's
agree
a
with.
mini turn. Yeah, you're right. It's
You
Yeah.
like,
mentioned the Castillo. We got to talk about the Castillo,
oh yeah,
guys.
okay, yeah, we
Trying
gotta
to
talk
talk
about
about
the
the
Castillo, the
Castillo.
Castillo.
Talk about the
Castillo.
Castillo.
Everybody's
All right, all
excited
right,
for
all
the
right.
Castillo.
All right, the Castillo. Go off, Ben. You're excited about it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's always there. It's got the nice little like cardboard thing for it, but like it's during the scoring phase, you can like pop out all of the minis that or the meeples that you put in there into like one region. And so anytime you're putting down meeples, you can pop them in
Yes.
the Castillo. And oftentimes I think like people forget you like I always forget who's put how much in the Castillo. Like you're always just kind of sneaking like one or two every once in a while. It's its own region. You score it too, and then it also like adds that last little bit of like random element where you have your little slider that you have to like decide where all the dudes who are in the Castillo are going. Yeah, that might have been a little garbled. I'm just so excited talking about the Castillo, but I don't know if I missed much.
So the
No,
Castillo is
I
kind
think
of like it's like a pseudo bonus. It's
Yeah.
like a pseudo bonus auction, but
yes.
and it's a bonus secret auction. But the twist is it's a bonus secret auction for a secret item. It's like you're all there in the audience of this auction, and the curtain's closed. You don't know what you're bidding. Nobody knows what you're bidding on, and for all you know, you're all bidding on different things. And
Mm,
so, like, not only are you bidding what's probably secret, unless everybody's been counting exactly how many people have been going in, but also like people are going to be going in different directions. And sometimes
yeah.
there is the funny result where like everybody goes to the same region, which is it would feel bad if it weren't so freaking funny when it
Yeah.
happens.
It truly is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Which
great
is
point
like
too.
I
Like
think the
so
fact what
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
no, I was just gonna say I think I would not like that, but it's just so funny when it happens. I don't care. Like it's just like the odds of it happening.
Right.
But I think the what makes the Castillo work is the fact that like it is secret. Like you don't. It would be kind of not as interesting if like you had to like in turn order say where you're putting those guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
The
Oh
fact it's a
yeah.
simultaneous reveal of where you're placing them is so important to how cool that mechanic is.
Yeah. You really start
Yeah.
trying to mind game it and yeah.
Yeah, it's a similar feeling to the Tammany Hall thing we discussed with the like revealing the favors, but like all like just one time and all of that distilled into like an important decision. Rather than like
Yeah,
Right.
having a
it's like
bunch of those back to back. Where it's like, oh, some of these really don't matter. It's like, oh yeah, this is the big one. We're doing it. Let's see what happens.
that's true. It's like you get to play Tammany Hall 3 times in like 3 mini phases of El Grande, and that's
Mm.
enough Tammany Hall because you get to play El Grande in the other turns.
El Grande is really, really fun. It's true. Yeah.
I mean, this game I've already said like that I like it a lot, but it just surprises me how good it is. Like they were cooking in the design process of this one. It's interesting because it's like prehistory in board game design. Like I said, I mean, I don't know what they were drawing from to come up with some of these ideas, but so many of these ideas are now so baked into modern board game design, not just in area control, but in general, that like it's crazy that it came from nothing, just two dudes in Germany
they were
Yeah.
closer to
making
like
this good
yeah
game.
they're closer to Plato's ideal of an area control game. They were like
Yeah.
swinging at it a little bit harder.
But the jump from this, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's on paper
Nice.
though, this game doesn't seem like it would be that good, but then it just is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like on
It just
paper,
Yeah.
all
it's like, why
works
have
so
this
well.
auction phase? Why have the Castillo? But then it's like you play the game and it's just like, oh, like everything makes sense. It all works together.
Yeah.
Oh man,
It's a
yeah,
beautiful, beautiful design. And I want to say one more thing about the Castillo. On that note, Will, of kind of even not knowing what you're bidding for, right? Because you can watch the board, you can see when people put things in the Castillo, but this is happening over 3 rounds. You know, you can get a pretty good idea of how many people have in there, but there's always that little inkling of doubt of like, they could have one more. They could have one less than what I'm thinking. And there's even times where we've been playing where that comes into play where, someone will be, too sure of how many things that something else have. And this happened in our last time. Will called out, like kind of speaking to himself, that he thought I had 4 guys in the Castillo. I had one. And so then I'm like really bluffing and playing it big, like, oh, I'm gonna
yeah.
send
I
all
had a
my
senior citizen
Castillo
moment.
guys here or there, and really gamed it. And it was like, no, I got one guy in there. I'm not in this bid.
Yeah,
But
the bluffing potential is hilarious. It's like, are you feeling lucky? Did I put in 3 meeples, or was it
right,
only one? You know?
you usually
you
know how
start
many, but yeah, there's always just a little bit of doubt there, and that's fun.
Yeah.
you do start gaslighting the other players a little bit, maybe.
Oh, this is
Yeah,
a great gaslighting
Oh
game.
yeah, I
Oh
saw,
yeah.
yeah, I put like 1,000 of those guys in there. I've been only putting things in the Castillo.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? You know?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And the Castillo, I
Yeah.
don't think we mentioned, also is a scoring area in and of itself, right? So that's important, I think, to
There is a reason to
incentivize
put
going
guys in there
Castillo.
that isn't just for the auction reason, which I think is
Yeah,
also good. It provides an incentive to do something with it,
yeah,
even if it. I think honestly that's there to. I think an experienced player of this game will recognize the value of the Castillo and put Meeple in there regardless,
right.
because the opportunity cost is so low. You're not scoring in the intervening rounds. So like, what are you losing? I think the reason that they added score to the Castillo is to make new players innately want to go there anyway. It's like there
Yeah.
is an incentive to make what is already the right play. You know what I mean? Which is to like
Mm,
put some guys in there,
But it also
which is
makes
good
it the
game
right
design.
play more often as well. And I think that there's something to be said for
True.
like,
Yeah.
let's just push people towards this fun part of the game in addition to doing everything else. But I agree, especially for new players, it's important because the Castillo is going to be valuable either way. And that's even more fun, right? The more reason there is to go to the Castillo, the better, in my opinion, because I love that part of the game, that little auction
Yes.
there.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
the cherry on top, really.
All right. Well,
absolutely.
should we score El Grande if we have the do we have the credentials to score El Grande?
Probably not. I think one more thing mechanically I wanted to mention just before we do is that in terms of the actual area control stuff on the board, one thing that I think is really interesting, right? We talked about that king card that's always available. You always have the chance to move the king if you're the top bidder. Well, the king's really important not only because he increases score in a region, but also because you can only place guys in the regions around the king, which to me is such a cool thing in this game in terms of the area control of like, I can lock people out from placing things in this region where, maybe I'm feeling really comfortable and I'm going to score my, 7 points or whatever in Toledo. And it's like, I think that part is really cool, being able to manipulate where people are allowed to place throughout the game. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, like moving the
that's also
king to
really
like
cool
the
to me.
opposite side of Spain, meaning that, and then it prevents somebody from being able to place their dudes down anywhere but what's adjacent to that, which means they can't place where they wanted to
Right,
place, and so you can use it
but they can
as a
always still
denial play.
place in the Castillo. That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
that's when you
Yes,
pop them
More,
in the
more
Castillo.
reason to go
Yep.
to the
that's when you
Castillo,
pop them
right?
in the Castillo. Yep.
Yep. Again,
Yep.
again with the feel good mechanics of like, well, I don't can't place them where I want to. Might as well pop them in the Castillo and just get them somewhere. Get those points
Yeah,
and get them like where I want them to later.
yeah.
Mhm.
But other than that, yeah, I'm down to rate.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about the BGG stats, Will?
Yeah. So, we didn't say what the weight was. So, the weight of El Grande is 2.97.
Hmm.
How do you guys
I
feel
think
about that? Does
that's
that feel accurate?
it
It's
feels way
more
lighter once you
complicated
know
than
how to play,
Tammany.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
This game
yeah, I
flows
agree.
so well that it probably feels like a 2.5 once you know how to play it. But
Yeah, I think that's appropriate for
for sure.
the teach and the learn, though. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes. And then the score is 7.8, but as we said, like that's for a game that's in the top 100, that's a pretty high rating actually, because inevitably there are going to be people that play it and don't like area control or don't like auctions, and they're going to give it a 2, and
right.
just the sheer inertia of that's going to
Too
bring
much
games like this
player
down.
interaction in this one for me. I'm gonna go ahead, like
Yeah, something like that.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
I'm going to start us off with this one if that's okay, because I know normally
absolutely.
I hedge my bets and I wait to see what you guys say, but I'm going to boldly come out and just give this one a 10. This
Wow.
Nice.
is basically I think the thing is this is a 10 with a little star
Hmm.
in the top right corner, and the star is that for this specific weight and length of time board
Yeah,
game, I think this is perfect. Like I think
yeah.
this is just still for like this kind of light area control game, there's literally no better game that I've ever played. And so I think I have to give it a 10. It's like I can't compare it to a game that's like 2 hours longer and has twice as many mechanics. That'd be kind of unfair, right? But I think in its weight class, it's just the best game. Like so I
Yeah.
have to give it a 10. At least that's
Respectable,
my logic.
respectable opinion. Absolutely.
It's just
What do you
yeah.
think, Ben?
I'm gonna bring the BGG score down. I'm gonna give it an 8.8. I like it a lot.
I like it a lot. Nice.
I'm bringing it down from what Will said as a 10. But yeah, I mean, I like
That's
it. I like it a lot.
Would that be the ACG score?
The area control
The
gamers?
area
What?
control gamers score?
yeah, the
Uh,
Yeah.
ACG aggregate score.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so
All
10,
three of us?
8.8.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like what Will said. That's kind of a concept that I find useful applying to a lot of things. Me and one of my other buddies will talk about like the perfect song and what do we mean, right? Like the perfect song's like the perfect at what it's trying to do, and the perfect game I think is just like what Will described, and it's kind of it's perfect at what it's trying to do. It's perfect in its weight class. Um, that makes a lot of sense to me for El Grande as well. um, I don't think I want to rate it in the same way though. So while I will agree that I think it's perfect for its weight class, I'm going to give it a more like, how much do I like the game type of score. And for me, it's a 9. It is so high up there. I absolutely love El Grande. It's one that I seek out. I want to play. Always feel like I'm making such cool decisions. Love seeing what other people are doing. Creates that table talk. Not 9 stars. Like I love this game.
Damn. The one
Cool.
time I go before you guys and look what happens.
I think the 10 is a super respectable rating, and your justification is like
Yeah,
perfect.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't have the lightweight against the heavyweight champion, you know? Wouldn't be a
Yeah, I
fair
mean,
fight.
Yeah,
I'm not rating it against Forbidden Stars, right? It's a different category.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But
You're in a
anyway,
different mood, different group. Yeah.
different mood, different group for sure. All right, shall we move on to the final game for today?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So, Yellow and Yangtze, or Huang, if you prefer. Um, we're looking at a 3 weight, basically. It's rated slightly higher in the old entry, 3.09. So it's rated, let's just say, a little bit heavier than El Grande. And the designer probably needs no introduction. Reiner Knizia, one of the most, I think actually the most prolific board game designer of all time in human history, probably.
Maybe
um,
Richard Garfield is in contention, but
Garfield's up there too,
yeah,
for sure. I think, but Knizia is just pumping these games out
yeah,
like
it's
crazy.
true. It's true.
And this is one of his better regarded games. Follow up to Tigris and Euphrates. It's an eternal debate which one is better, which we will not go into currently. We're just going to be talking about this game on its own. But a lot of Reiner is known for basically two genres of games in particular: auction games and tile laying games. And he's got plenty of other games, like that are he's well known for as well. But those are kind of his two main lanes, so to speak. And I think this game is a great tile laying game. And of course, it's area control because you're laying tiles. There's a lot of area control in this game. Um, the twist of this game in particular is that things get very muddy very quickly. And what's your territory and what's enemy territory is can change at the drop of a hat. And that's really cool. I
Yes.
don't think I've played um, you know this is a little bit off topic, but this does actually make me realize the Galactic Renaissance may have been trying to sort of replicate some of like the Huang muddiness.
Yes.
Now that I think
That's
about
a
it,
thought that's crossed my mind as well.
yeah, you probably thought of it before I did. I honestly just thought of it right now, but I was thinking like of other games that are kind of like this, and obviously Inish comes to mind. And we'll talk about that in a future episode for sure. But also Galactic Renaissance, where it's kind of there's this ability for, despite it being an area control game, for people to coexist in the same
Yeah.
area, and
And there's
maybe
good
even,
reason to want to do it even in
and there is good reason to want
Yeah.
to preserve the peace between you and others in this game.
Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of times in this game too where uh like a war happens and you're just or like you cause a war. Like I've caused wars in this game and I'm just like, why did I even do this? Like what am I how am I even benefiting from this? Am I benefiting from this? Like what have I done? What is the cost of this?
right.
You know?
Yeah, it's easy to get into those situations because the board state can be so muddy, as Will put it, right? Like it's kind of hard to tell exactly what's going on at certain points. And not due to any failure of, the components of the new version of the game, or I imagine the old version of the game was just fine as well in terms of, showing you the board state. It's just like a little confusing as soon as you start letting people exist in the same area, right? Like how do you get out of that? Well, there's two ways in the game, but neither can be the most attractive at any given moment. As Ben was pointing out.
It's going to
Yeah.
depend on your hand of tiles, which is
Yes.
basically that's the golden rule of this game: is you play your hand basically. And
Yeah.
this is one of those things where the game kind of tells you what to do and you have to listen. And there's wiggle room, but if you got a hand of red tiles or a hand of yellow tiles, then you should go for an unrest or wars if you can, to take advantage of that while it's in your hand, because the game also encourages you to spend tiles freely because everybody refills their full hand at the end of every turn, including other players' turns. And so the nice thing about those kinds of hands is that when you spend them all, you're getting everything back at no cost really, and plus you're going to get whatever benefit you got for winning that conflict, depending on the type. It is one of those things where, as Ben said, where it's easy to. This is more the case for war than for unrest, or not unrest. What is it
Revolt.
called?
Revolt.
Revolt. I
Yeah.
don't know why. I don't know why I said unrest. I guess it is a type of unrest, but yeah, revolting. Revolting is a little easier.
Yeah.
Uh, because it's like a 1v1 basically. It's your leader versus their leader. More things are known, and there also can't be third party intervention
Right.
like there
Yeah.
can be in war. And
Yeah.
obviously you will be blown out sometimes if they have more yellow tiles than you, but I feel like more often than not, you only started the revolt because you were quite confident that you could pull it off.
Right.
Also, the mechanics of how the revolt works, because the defender wins ties, so you have to be pretty confident that you have at least one more
hmm
revolt power
Or
than the
else
The
or
other.
else
defender
why even
not only
bother?
wins ties, but also plays their yellow tiles from hand second, right? And so
Yes,
you
yeah.
you
So
have
it's
to
pretty
kind of pull
hard.
them in. Yeah, it is
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
you have to
difficult.
know that you have it basically, or else you just
Yes.
wasted your that action for the turn.
yeah.
Right.
War though gets really complicated because the thing that's really cool about this game is the kind of emergent state building that occurs with everybody being up in each other's business with oh, you want to place some green tiles? You want to put a green pagoda down? Well, I'll put my green leader over here, and now you're working for me.
Right.
And it may become difficult to remove that green leader now for various reasons. And so so maybe it's easier for you to put your green leader in a neighboring nation and then start a war just so that your green leader can be the green leader for the original nation that was actually your nation. And so you end up in all these funny situations um, like that. And
Yeah, yeah. You're on both sides of a conflict. Like
yeah,
you have your yellow and your blue guy on one side of a conflict, and then like you have your red and your art guy on the other side, and you're kind of like you're picking children. You're like trying to figure out
Hmm.
which ones you care about more, you know.
Right. One thing that I think ties into that of, you're kind of picking between these guys. Who do I want to win? Because I'm going to have a guy in this state, this side of the conflict, and a guy in this state, this other side of the conflict, and they're going to war. I'm going to lose at least, I'm going to lose one of these guys. I love that, you know the ambassador is coming back to your hand has an effect, because every single one of these except for the artisan has an effect while you have that leader like not on the board. And so I love like trying to pick and choose that way of like, oh, I really want my yellow guy, my ambassador, back in my hand so that I can do these revolts easier at this stage in the game. To me, that's pretty interesting. I'm glad that they give you a little bit of guidance there.
well, certainly the blue and green effects are both very important in hand. Like only having to spend one blue tile for a peasant's revolt and only having to spend one green tile to build. I think spending two green to build something is
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not easy, and you'd rather be putting down some green tiles to. I honestly think like mathematically it's inefficient to be building with two tiles, right? I mean, what are you building that's better than putting down the two green tiles and getting your pick of whatever's in the market? I mean,
Right.
it doesn't really make sense to me to build at all unless you have your green guy in hand. Um,
yeah,
and also with the blue guy, yeah, I think it's like because you can get rid of blue tiles freely in most situations, um, spending multiple unless you're already at eight blue points doesn't really make any sense to me. And there will be situations where you're at eight and you can just spend the tiles and it's not a big deal. But in the early game, certainly spending two blues for a revolt is bad.
yeah. It's got to be it's got to be a really good revolt. You know, it's really got to do something. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that is that there's different ratios for all the tiles, so you're going to see less blue tiles throughout the game. It's really damaging as a result to spend two instead of, just the one. It's one of those tiles where you kind of need to play it to rack up points. If you build a blue pagoda, maybe you can get some points over time, but I don't know.
Pagoda's
Um,
so easy to be destroyed. You know, that's the main
yeah,
point of
someone
a
else has their blue guy
peasant's
in hand. We'll
revolt.
destroy it
Yeah,
for one. What are you doing? You know?
yeah,
Yeah, the two moral lessons of this game is that it's easier to destroy than it is to create pagodas, and
Pagodas. Yeah.
it's also the case that war is destructive for both sides.
yeah. Everybody
That's
loses.
those are the two takeaways from this game. I just a quick kind of general thing that I like about this game is I think this game is very smart in player interaction.
Hmm.
Um, there are so many ways to interact with players. You're doing it every turn, almost no matter what. After the very beginning of the game, where there might be a little bit of individual building of your own place, but then after that, it's all out the window. Um, I think that this is another one of those games where I think player interaction is so ingrained with the game design that even if you're a person who maybe doesn't play that many area control games or many games where there's much player interaction, just playing this game normally entails interacting with people constantly, which generates table talk, which generates just kind of a conversation, which is what you want a board game to be like. You want it to be a social experience, or else why else are you doing it in person? This game definitely generates a conversation and even generates
Yeah.
kind of like a funny story. This is one of
Yeah,
those games, kind of like Dead Reckoning, where like there's a story being told by every game of Huang, and the rise and fall of various regions and the little fishing and art villages that are left alone, and there's
Yep.
just things
Mhm.
happen on the board that are funny to talk about.
Yeah, it's like, oh,
Absolutely.
the empire to the east is amassing an army. They'll soon march on the peaceful artisans of the west.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And anything that I feel like all of us are probably pretty positive on this game. Um, one thing that I'm not so sure about with this one though is like I think our group is not too prone to analysis paralysis, but this game feels like it could really slow down some gamers. It has so much like thought that you can put into it, and at some point you kind of just have to throw up your hands and I'm gonna make my play.
This
yeah,
game has an enormously open decision space.
Yeah.
It's interesting because usually uh, Reiner games have a closed decision space, but a lot of strategy in that space. This is a little bit different because even though the number of actions you can take are few in number, the amount of possible things you can do in your turn is huge. And there's all sorts of things you can be doing, which does, I agree, it can lead to a little bit of AP even for us. And considering this is a pretty light game, it just to sort of like, man, I could do like 50 different things on this turn. What's best, or what undermines the person who's in the lead the most efficiently while also advancing my own victory point number. You
who
Yeah.
can
who
definitely
is
get
in the
trapped
lead?
there.
You know?
Who is in the
Yeah.
lead? Well, I will say one
Yeah,
good thing about this game's design is that the board state kind of tells you how many points people have if you've been paying attention.
Mm,
And so, as long as you are paying attention, you can sort of be tracking points, which would otherwise be secret because they're literally behind like a screen, so you don't know exactly how many, but you have a pretty good idea of what people are doing. I haven't seen so and so put any red tiles down, so I know that they want red, which means that if a war happens over a red leader, I should really try to prevent them from winning, like that kind of thing.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
game just tells you that on the board. Like you don't really need to talk about that particular thing.
I think we
yeah,
should mention kind of that interesting bit about the scoring system, right? Where you're not counting how many total points you have. There's all these different colors of points, same colors as the leaders, same colors as the tiles, and you have to count what category of points you have the least amount in, and then you have your white points, which are a wild card. And that really changes your decision making throughout the game. Like Will was pointing out, you can kind of map, oh, this person really must not have a lot of red points. Can you tell whether they have 1 point versus 2 point? That can be a little bit murky, but you have a pretty good idea where people are at, and that helps inform some of your decisions of how are you going to put people to rest. So pretty cool.
yeah,
I do think that I've gone back and forth on this, but overall, I think I like the fact that the art is not too powerful.
Mm,
In that, in the event of a tiebreak, the art is less valuable because you have to go down to count like what your actual lowest number is without adding in the wild cards. I think if it weren't that way, then like the white pagoda or just white points in general would just be everybody would just be like, oh my god, I got a white tile, I got to slap it down, and the game would kind of become centralized around just going for those points. Um, but because you have to bear in mind they're a little bit weaker in endgame scoring, if it comes to a tiebreak, which is common in this game, it's a low scoring game. I think it's good that people are incentivized to use all the tiles, all the different colors, do a little bit of everything. Don't neglect one thing, even if you do focus on some things over others.
right. Yeah, you have to have it at some point in the game really focused on each color in order to get a win in this one.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't have too much else on Huang. What about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I
No.
think we've talked a little bit about how sometimes it feels a little uh, muddy as to why the person who won. Like
Mm,
it can be a little bit like, oh, what decisions did they make that were like really, really good. Like it's a little hard to analyze sometimes after the end of the game and be like, yeah, that was like one of the defining moments of like what got that person the win. It's kind of like I don't know, like it seems
Yeah.
pretty close. Like usually it's like everybody's like at about seven, you know, like they've got seven in all their categories, and then maybe one person has eight, and it's kind of like, you know, well, I guess they built that pagoda, but then Blake stole that pagoda for like a turn, and then Will
Yeah,
stole
they
that
must have had it
pagoda for
one
like
more
a
turn than
turn,
anybody else, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think a
right?
lot of
Totally.
games. This is another thing that I think it's like the more you play the game, maybe the more prone to AP you are, because once you've played the game multiple times and you know how endgame scoring works, you realize that literally every single point matters in endgame. Like
Yeah.
1 point, one decision might be the difference between being 1 point ahead of everybody and not having to go into the tiebreak. And so that's even more like, oh my god, I can't make a wrong decision. Um,
Yeah, and here, like,
it's just so
it'd
much
be
on the line.
interesting. It'd be interesting to pull out the Excel spreadsheet and like get some data for this game and see if there is like a first player bias, because there isn't
That's
really
another thing.
like,
There
yeah,
does seem to be a first player advantage in this game, which is, I
yeah,
think, I mean, just in our experience, it's real. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like just being able to have like one extra turn. Like I think the last game we played, I was like, I needed one more green point. I had a green tile in hand, and I would have been like contesting for the win. But I just like I didn't have that extra turn. Like it was just like it stopped the one before me, and it was like Blake started, and like if I was sitting where Will was, I would have had an extra turn. You know, like but yeah, it was just like going last felt like kind of a disadvantage.
Yeah.
mhm.
And I think to explain that a little bit, the game end is immediate as soon as the bag is out of tiles. It's just immediate. And so I think it's probably maybe it's a three-player thing with, like, if you're averaging how quickly people are going through the bag, you it ends up happening where, it's the first player. I don't know. I'm not fully convinced that it's like a strong advantage, but I
No, it's
agree there's
minor,
probably
but
something there.
as we said, literally 1 point can be the difference between winning in this game or
Right.
being in the tiebreak with everybody. So even if it is just a small advantage, it is a real advantage, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
as such requires a little bit of consideration from the players. But because there is so much player interaction in this game, someone who is experienced enough to know that the first player has an advantage and that scoring comes down to just 1 point or 2 points sometimes will know that the first player should probably be beaten up a little bit and just hazed by the other players with some peasants revolts and things, just to sort of even things out. I think it might just be necessary to do that and just keep that in mind over the course of the game, that like maybe this
Yeah,
person gets one more turn than everyone else, and so you have to sort of actively disrupt them a little bit more.
Yeah.
yeah,
Um
Anyway,
yeah.
if there's nothing else, should we move on to the final scoring?
yeah. I
Yeah,
guess
let's
so.
do it. Huang. I think I gave a score first and then Will gave a score first. So how about you, Ben? Do you want to score Huang?
Yeah, 8.
This is 8. That's right on the money. It's 7.8 on BGG for Yellow Yangtze and an 8.1 for the new version, which of course has fewer
Okay,
votes.
split the difference. Yeah, yeah. This is an 8 if I ever saw one. I enjoy it. I like playing it. You know, I again like I could probably play this with some people who are like not necessarily board gamers. Like I wouldn't be able to teach it to my grandma. I could probably teach it to my dad. You know, um, like, and I think I'd have pretty good fun like playing this with some people, like like some people who haven't played much board games, because I think I'm about in the same boat as them, where it's like I don't know what's going on either. Like
Yeah.
like there's enough fuzziness there that it's kind of like I think it's fun throughout, and you don't get that situation where it's like I'm having to like coach the other people into not making a bad decision or something. It's like, hey, I don't know if that war was a good idea, but like, you know,
You did it.
you did it.
Yeah, I mean, like the worst thing you can be doing on a turn of this game is like, hey, you put down a tile, you got a point. You put down another tile, you got another point. So like the worst thing is you're still getting points, right? I
Yeah.
Yeah.
mean,
I could
so
see it being bad with like if somebody's like deliberately throwing, like if you're just feeding points to another player by like placing tiles in a region where
yeah.
you don't get
Although
points,
I would hope that
you
that's like
know?
the bare minimum of like someone who's interested enough to play the board game in the first place that they would know not to do that,
Right.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. But yeah, I mean that is a thing that can happen.
There are certainly times where it might be necessary to, place down a tile that gives someone else a point, and then you place your second tile and it starts a war, right? That first one was helping to bridge towards a war and you give someone 1 point. But yeah, I mean, hopefully no one's throwing hard and just like placing down tiles without any, real strategic reasoning.
That at a
Yeah.
higher player count, certainly with 5, I can see that being more of a thing. Not sure if it's like a real balance issue or whatever, but I could see that being more prevalent at a higher player count.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
haven't played this at higher player counts. We have no idea. It could be one of those. It feels pretty good at 3, but it could be like I think we've talked about this. It feels like maybe at a higher player count, it'd be like ooh,
This might be
a
like
little
Tammany Hall,
fuzzy.
in that
Yeah,
this might be like
Yeah.
Tammany Hall, in which is this might just be like a 3-player game. It
Yeah,
feels good at
I
3.
I argued pretty hard for that as well. Of like, dude, it's the board's gonna change too much in between your turns if it's higher than 3. I just don't think that would help the game at all.
There's that,
Surely
and
the strategy would be way less
everyone's
impactful.
getting. This is an old board game mechanic, but basically making the game, or at least in theory, trying to make the game always last the same amount of time by having the bag be the same size for every player count. So
yeah,
there's a finite number of tiles that will be drawn regardless of player count,
Yeah.
meaning that in theory, if the amount of time spent per tile in the bag is the same across player counts, that the game length would be the same. But of course, that's not true. But it's an attempt to. And but I think that what that means is that the more players you have, you play less
Hmm.
proportionally and in actual physical time as well. Like
Right.
obviously, you have fewer turns, but you also like see fewer tiles. You know.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's probably right with this one. Um, I respect the 8.0 on that. I think that's a good score. What do you think, Will? Do you want to give your score last, or do you want to give it second?
I'm actually with Ben here. This is an 8 for me. I think this is a solid 8. I would be more keen on giving it above an 8 than below an 8. Like maybe I could be like an 8.2 or something, but I don't love this design as much as I love El Grande, of course. But I think that this game does have some AP issues, as we mentioned, and I do think that the scoring is a little bit weird.
Mm,
Um, be, not because I don't like the way scoring works, but because it's combined with a system that gives you random tiles. So there are going to be games where like you just don't see any greens, and this is even worse in a higher player count game. I bet. Like you just, there were no greens in the bag that you drew. Like what are you going to do about it? And
right.
that being the case, you have to get whites, and whites are hard to get. And I think that there is an element of randomness from the bag that I don't love in an area control game, because you don't really have any way to control it besides spending an action to discard and redraw, kind of. Um, I think that that randomness makes me bring the game down to an 8, from like where I like the design enough that like if it were less random, I'd be more keen on giving it a higher score, because I do like this game a lot. I love the player interaction. I like the components. I love the readability of the board. I like a lot of things about it. But I think there is it's just quite random, maybe a little too random for me to give a higher score. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
It's
I think you guys
mitigated.
are.
Yeah.
Oh, that's that, Ben. Go ahead.
Oh, it's mitigated somewhat by the like if you were desperately in need of a green point, you could try to like fight a green leader. Like you get the points for like revolting or warring and like beating their leader. So like
You
if you never draw a green tile, you can still get green points, but you still would need art for sure.
Yeah, and
In
it's
order
not
to make
easy
money.
to be winning revolts or wars like every turn. Certainly not
No.
wars.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. Good point, Ben. I think you guys are both spot on with this one in terms of I give it an 8 as well. I really want to give it a higher score, like an
Me
8.5,
too. I
but
want to give it a higher, but it's just I don't think I can.
yeah, if I had to make the comparison to El Grande, where we're talking about El Grande, we're saying all of these different parts of the game work so well together. They're so harmonious. And this game, I think, has a lot of really interesting stuff going on, but there's not as much of like a harmony of it, of all the mechanics there. Ben mentioned, well, it can feel really like murky when you do win or when someone else does win. Like, what exactly did they do to win? And then to Will's point, well, it's a bunch of small things that are happening plus a bunch of sort of things out of your control, a bunch of random things. And there's so many moments like this that get mixed in where it's like it's kind of hard to point to the game, even though it does a good job of creating a story. So it's like, I don't know, you're kind of having fun the whole time, but some of it can feel a little bit inconsequential at the end, um, given that randomness. So it brings it
Yeah.
down a little bit for me. 8 seems right. It's really really fun, but yeah, don't expect to go into this one, like we're gonna duel here. It's kind of an accessory to conversation. This game.
I think it's worth mentioning just as a sort of last thing to talk about is that so this game has a problem with turn order. Like we said, a lot of modern board games give something to the second and third player or fourth and fifth player and so on
Yeah.
to make up for the fact that they didn't go. As we talked about Dead Reckoning last episode, in Dead Reckoning you get more barrels the further back you are in turn order, which is good. It's good to get something for that because I think they recognize there is a first player advantage in that kind of game. And additionally, in that game, regardless of who triggers end game, everybody else still gets a turn. It may not be the best turn ever, but they still get to go.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good design. I think Dead Reckoning is a better design, but I think that to defend my 10 for El Grande, I have to bring up El Grande about this, which is to say that turn order in El Grande isn't random.
Mm,
Nobody's just the first player the whole game. This is like the turn order isn't like something arbitrarily decided. It's something that's being bid over every single turn and is baked into the game mechanics. And so nobody needs to be getting like any compensation for not being first player or not in El Grande because like that's part of the game. Like you get to be first player this time because you bid for it.
Yeah,
And then
and you get
mm,
compensation if you like have the lower numbers.
yeah,
If you
and
have the low.
so I think that's it's almost like a 4D chess like meta board game thing. It's like, man, turn order is like even in chess, like going first is like this very small advantage even at the very highest level. And so like acknowledging that and then making the design acknowledge that and integrate it into the game in such a way that there is no first player advantage at all is really cool. Just as you know, just as
yeah,
another pro for that.
yeah, definitely. I think, in my opinion, the solution to this one with the first player advantage would just be letting everybody get to the same number of turns, even if the bag is drawn, rather than ending game immediately. I don't think it would be that big a change.
No, it wouldn't
Um,
be significant, but it's just I think it's worth bringing up because it is part of the design.
yeah, definitely, 100%. So yeah, we're all at an 8 on that one. I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
Is that the first time we've all had like the exact same score?
I thought we did
No,
that
we
for
just did
Tammany.
it for
Yeah, we
Tammany
did with
Hall.
Tammany. Yeah,
Oh, what did we just get Tammany? Did we all
We all gave that a 7.5.
7.5, 7.5? Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
we were like, yeah.
Man, it's almost like we play these games together.
Right. True. True.
It's like we talk about them after we play them already, and that was part of the inspiration for this podcast or
It
something.
it, it is funny though because like I don't think we ever like talk about scoring like after we play these games like on our like board gaming day. We just like we'll talk about the game, but I'll never say like, oh yeah, this is like a 7.5. But it's funny that like we all arrive at that ballpark the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. All
Well,
right, well we
cool.
should probably wrap it up. Um, feel free to leave a comment with any particular game or group of games you'd like us to talk about. Otherwise, we'll just keep picking games to talk about.
Yeah.
Otherwise, talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you guys. Nice talking. Bye.
Wait.